Imagine this. You're standing on a train platform in Birmingham, or maybe Leeds, or the outskirts of London. It's raining, obviously, and your train was supposed to be here 20 minutes ago. When you check your phone, the ticket price has gone up by 5% since last year, but the service has somehow gotten worse. You're tired. You've been working harder than ever, yet your bank account looks exactly the same as it did in 2008. In fact, adjusted for inflation, you're actually poorer. You look around at the crumbling infrastructure, the high streets filled with vape shops and betting terminals, and you have this nagging, sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach that the ride is over, that the country isn't just going through a rough patch, but that something is fundamentally, structurally broken. Welcome to the United Kingdom. Once the workshop of the world, the ruler of the waves, the empire on which the sun never set. Today, it's the sick man of Europe. Again. We are looking at an economy that has effectively stopped growing for 15 years. We are looking at a housing market that operates like a pyramid scheme, a healthcare system on life support, and a political class that seems to have spent the last decade playing musical chairs while the Titanic sinks. But why? How did an economic superpower turn into a cautionary tale? Is it Brexit? Is it laziness? Or is it something much darker and much deeply rooted in the very soil of the British class system? Buckle up, grab a cup of tea, if you can afford the electricity to boil the kettle. We're about to dissect the autopsy of an empire. 1. The Great Stagnation, or why you aren't getting richer. Let's start with the elephant in the room. The reason you feel broke is because the country is broke, but not in the way you might think. We aren't out of money, we're out of ideas and efficiency. Economists call this the productivity puzzle. I call it the Great British Nap. Here is the brutal reality. Since the 2008 financial crisis, British productivity has flatlined. To put this in perspective, if the UK had continued growing at its pre-2008 trend, the average worker, that's you, would be earning roughly $11,000, $14,000 more per year right now. Think about that. Take a second. Imagine your bank account with an extra 11 grand in it every single year. That is the cost of this stagnation. But to understand why, we have to look at a tale of two workers. Let's travel to France. Meet Pierre. Pierre works in a factory. His boss, fearing strict French labour laws and high wages, has invested millions in high-tech robots, automated assembly lines, and advanced software. Pierre pushes a button, monitors a screen, and produces 100 widgets an hour. He gets paid well because he generates a lot of value. Now let's cross the channel to meet Barry. Barry works in a similar industry in the UK, but Barry's boss didn't buy the robots. Why? Because in the UK, labour is cheap, and firing people is relatively easy. It was cheaper for the boss to hire Barry and two of his mates to move boxes by hand than to invest in a £1 million machine. Barry works harder than Pierre, he sweats more, he breaks his back, but he only produces 20 widgets an hour because he's doing it manually. This is the UK economy in a nutshell. We have created a low-investment, low-wage trap. The numbers are terrifying. Business investment in the UK has been trailing the rest of the G7 for decades, but it fell off a cliff after 2016. We'll get to the B word later, don't worry. British companies don't invest in new tech, new machinery or training. They hoard cash or pay out dividends. And the government? They are arguably worse. The UK has consistently had some of the lowest public investment levels in the advanced world. We are trying to run a 21st century economy on Victorian infrastructure. We are trying to compete with Silicon Valley using copper wire internet and a train network built when Queen Victoria was still in mourning. It's the economic equivalent of trying to win a Formula One race while driving a 1998 Ford Fiesta. You can rev the engine as hard as you want, but you're going to get lapped. And this brings us to the finance curse. The UK decided somewhere around the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher that we didn't need to make things anymore. We would just move money around. We turned London into the world's hedge fund. While banking makes a lot of money for bankers, it doesn't necessarily help the productivity of the wider economy. In fact, it sucks talent away. The smartest physicists and engineers in Britain aren't designing new fusion reactors or high-speed trains. They're in the City of London, writing algorithms to shave a fraction of a cent off a currency trade. We brain-drained ourselves. We hollowed out the real economy to build a casino, and when the casino bust in 2008, we realised we'd forgotten how to do anything else. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the abyss, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We cover the dark side of finance and history every week, and you don't want to miss the next collapse. Also, let me know in the comments, do you feel richer or poorer than you did 5 years ago? Be honest. 2. The housing hostage situation, the rentier state. If productivity is the silent killer of the UK economy, housing is the loud, screaming murderer holding a knife to its throat. You cannot talk about why Britain is broken without talking about the fact that it is illegal to build anything. Let's play a game. Let's say you want to build a data centre, a laboratory, or just a nice block of flats so people can live near their jobs. In Texas, you just buy the land and build it. In Japan, you adhere to simple zoning laws and build it. In the UK, you enter the seventh circle of bureaucratic hell known as the Town and Country Planning Act of 1947. This act effectively nationalised the right to build. It gave local councils the power to say no to almost anything. And who sits on local councils? People who already own houses, people who don't want construction noise, people who want the value of their asset to go up forever. We call them NIMBYs, not in my backyard. But in the UK, they are more like bananas, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. Let's look at the damage. In the late 90s, the average house cost about 4 times the average salary. Today, it's over 8 times. In London, it can be 12 to 14 times. This isn't just annoying, it destroys the economy. Here is the mechanism. 1. Talent freezes. If you get a great job offer in Cambridge or London, where the innovation happens, you might turn it down because the rent is $2,000 for a shoebox. So the most productive cities can't get the workers they need. 2. Money vanishes. Young people spend 40% to 50% of their income on rent. That is money that isn't being spent in local businesses, isn't being invested in stocks, and isn't starting new companies. It is simply being transferred from the productive young to the idle old landlords. 3. The Green Belt. Lie. We are told we can't build because we need to protect the beautiful British countryside. The Green Belt was designed to stop urban sprawl, but in reality it acts as a corset strangling the cities. A huge chunk of the Green Belt isn't rolling hills and idyllic forests. It's intensive agriculture with no public access, or worse, golf courses. There is a shocking stat for you. Golf courses cover more land in Surrey than housing does. Let that sink in. We have prioritised a game for wealthy retirees over homes for the workforce that keeps the country alive. This has created a feudal system. If your parents own property, you're fine, you'll inherit wealth. If they don't, you're a serf. You will work to pay off someone else's mortgage. This housing crisis sucks the life out of everything. It makes infrastructure expensive, because buying the land to build a train line costs billions. It increases the benefits bill because the government has to subsidise rents. And it breeds deep, seething resentment between the generations. The UK economy has essentially become a housing market with a small country attached to it. And until the concrete starts pouring, the economy will remain stuck in the mud. 3. The austerity experiment, cutting off your leg to lose weight. So, we have a productivity crisis and a housing crisis. Bad, right? But what if I told you the government saw these problems and decided the best solution was to take a sledgehammer to the foundations of the state? Enter 2010. The global financial crisis has just ravaged the world. The UK deficit is high. The new coalition government comes in with a very catchy, very dangerous metaphor. The nation's credit card is maxed out. It sounds sensible, doesn't it? If you, Dave from down the pub, spend more than you earn, you go bust. So surely the government must stop spending to pay off the debt. Wrong. This is what economists call the fallacy of composition. A government is not a household. If you stop spending money at the pub owner loses income, but the economy carries on. If the government stops spending, they fire nurses, cancel construction projects, and freeze wages. The people who lost those jobs then stop spending money in the shops. The shops then pay less tax. Suddenly the government has less revenue than before, so they cut spending again. It is a doom loop. Between 2010 and 2019, the UK underwent one of the most severe programmes of spending cuts in modern history. They slashed funding for local councils by nearly 50%. They froze public sector pay. They cut police numbers by 20,000. The result? We are now living in the ruins. Let's look at the NHS. It's the national religion, right? We clapped for it during the pandemic, but you can't pay nurses with applause. Due to a decade of underfunding relative to demand, waiting lists have hit over 7 million people. If 10% of your workforce is stuck on a waiting list for a hip operation or mental health support, they can't work. Illness is now a major drag on the economy. We have a record number of people long-term sick, over 2.5 million. These are people who want to work but are physically or mentally broken, and the system that is supposed to fix them has collapsed. We essentially stopped performing maintenance on the country. It's like owning a car and deciding to save money by never changing the oil. Sure, you save $50 a day, but 3 years later the engine explodes, and it costs you $5,000. We saved pennies in the 2010s to spend billions in the 2020s just to stand still. We closed the libraries, we let the potholes grow, we let the schools crumble, literally look up rat concrete. And now we're wondering why everything feels so shabby. Austerity didn't just trim the fat, it cut into the muscle and bone, and an emaciated athlete cannot win a gold medal. 4. The Brexit hangover, the elephant in the room. Okay, deep breath. Don't scroll down to the comments just yet, put the pitchforks down. We have to talk about it. The B word. Whether you voted Leave, Remain, or drew a smiley face on the ballot paper, the economic reality of Brexit is now visible in the data. And numbers don't have feelings. In 2016, the UK voted to leave the single biggest free trade bloc on the planet. The logic was global Britain. We would break free from European shackles and trade with the world. The reality has been complicated. Here is the boring but critical truth. Trade barriers cost money. Before Brexit, a business in Manchester could sell a widget to a customer in Munich as easily as selling it to a customer in Birmingham. No forms, no checks, just commerce. Now, paperwork, veterinary checks, rules of origin, VAT complications. Small businesses were hit the hardest. If you're a massive corporation like Nissan, you can hire a department of lawyers to handle the paperwork. If you're a small artisan cheesemaker, you just stop exporting. It's not worth the hassle. According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, the guys who check the government's homework, Brexit is on track to reduce the UK's potential GDP by 4% over the long term. 4% might sound small. But remember the hook of this video? 4% of GDP is about $100 billion a year. That is almost the entire budget for the Department of Education. Gone. Poof. Vanished into the friction of red tape. But the immediate damage wasn't just trade, it was uncertainty. Investors hate uncertainty. They are cowards. Between 2016 and 2020, while the UK government argued with itself about what Brexit actually meant, hard, soft, red, white, and blue, businesses sat on their hands. Why build a factory in Sunderland if you don't know if you can sell the cars to Europe next year? Why set up your European HQ in London if the data laws might change? So they went to Dublin. They went to Amsterdam. They went to Paris. We voluntarily introduced sanctions on our own economy. We made ourselves poorer, harder to deal with, and less attractive to the outside world. Is it the only reason the economy is broken? No. As we discussed, we were stagnant way before 2016. But Brexit acted like a multiplier. It took a fragile, low-productivity economy and threw sand in the gears. It was the final nail in the coffin of the pragmatic, stable Britain brand. We used to be the boring, sensible country where you could safely park your money. Now, we look chaotic, and in finance, chaos is expensive. Quick pause. We're about to get into the really sticky stuff, the demographic time bomb that nobody wants to talk about. If you are finding this analysis useful, share it with a friend who keeps complaining about the price of a pint. It might help them understand why that beer costs $7, and type continue for the next part. 5. The silver squeeze. Gerontocracy rules. If housing is a pyramid scheme, the UK welfare state is fast becoming a Ponzi scheme. And I'm sorry to say this, but we need to talk about grandma. The UK is getting old, fast. By 2040, nearly 1 in 4 people will be aged 65 or over. Now generally, people living longer is a good thing. We like that. But economically, it presents a math problem that no politician has the guts to solve. We have created a system designed to protect the old at the expense of the young. Exhibit A, the triple lock. It sounds like a wrestling move, but it's actually a guarantee that the state pension will rise every year by whichever is highest. Inflation, average earnings, or 2.5%. Think about what that means. If the economy crashes and wages fall, like in 2020, pensioners get a 2.5% raise. If inflation goes crazy, Like in 2022, pensioners get an inflation-matching raise, over 10%. Meanwhile, the working population, the people actually generating the wealth, have seen their real wages stagnate for 15 years. The result? We have achieved something historically bizarre. For the first time in history, the average pensioner in the UK is now less likely to be in poverty than the average working family. We are taxing the working poor to subsidise the asset-rich retired. And who pays for the healthcare of this ageing population? You do. The tax burden in the UK is hitting a 70-year high. Why? Because the NHS consumes an ever-growing slice of the pie to treat age-related conditions. Politics is a numbers game. Old people vote, young people don't. So, policies are written to keep house prices high, to fund inheritances and care costs, and pensions generous, while tuition fees skyrocket and national insurance goes up. It is a transfer of wealth from the future to the past, and if you are under 40, you are basically the designated driver at a party where everyone else is drinking expensive champagne on your credit card. 6. The Hunger Games, London versus the rest. Let's get in a helicopter. We're going to fly over the UK. If you look at Germany, you see multiple engines of power. Berlin for techie culture, Frankfurt for finance, Munich for industry, Hamburg for shipping. It is a balanced engine. Now look at the UK. It is a one-engine plane, and that engine is London. The inequality between London and the southeast and the rest of the country is staggering. It is worse than the divide between East and West Germany before the wall came down. Let's talk about infrastructure. In London, they just spent $19 billion on the Elizabeth Line, a shiny, air-conditioned, high-speed underground railway that is genuinely world-class. In the north of England, people are still commuting on trains that are essentially buses bolted onto 1980s truck chassis. They are slow, they leak, and they are never on time. The government promised to fix this. They announced levelling up. They promised High-Speed 2, HS2, a bullet train that would connect London, Birmingham, Manchester and Leeds, shrinking the country and supercharging the northern economy. And then, they cancelled the northern leg. The train will now go from London to slightly outside Birmingham, and that's it. It is the perfect metaphor for the UK economy. Over budget, delayed, and ultimately giving up before it reaches the people who actually need it. This matters because productivity creates wealth. London is one of the most productive places in Europe, but huge swathes of the UK, Wales, the northeast Cornwall, are statistically poorer than parts of the former Soviet bloc in Eastern Europe. We are running a country where the capital city operates like Singapore, and the provinces operate like, well, struggling post-industrial zones without a plan. You cannot run a G7 economy on one city. When London sneezes, like in the financial crash, the whole country catches pneumonia. And when the rest of the country is left to rot, you get political instability, resentment, and a massive waste of human potential. Imagine how many brilliant entrepreneurs are stuck in towns with bad internet, no train links, and no investment capital. That is the lost growth we are crying about. Quick pause. We're almost at the end. We've diagnosed the disease, but is there a cure, or are we terminal? In the final part, we're going to wrap up with the death of the dream, and what this actually means for your future. 7. The end of the British dream, and what comes next. So here we are. We've looked at the productivity collapse, the housing cartel, the austerity scars, the trade barriers, the demographic time bomb, and the regional inequality. But the biggest cost isn't in the GDP figures, it's psychological. The British dream, the unwritten contract that said, if you work hard, you will buy a house, have a secure retirement, and your kids will be richer than you, has been shredded. For the first time in modern history, the next generation of Britons is on track to be poorer than their parents. And when you break the social contract, things get ugly. We are seeing a massive brain drain. Doctors are moving to Australia. Engineers are moving to the US. Researchers are moving to Switzerland. Why? Because in those countries, their wages can actually buy them a life. If the UK cannot offer its young people a future, it simply won't have one. So, is it over? Is the UK destined to become a rainy museum island? A theme park for American tourists with a nuclear arsenal attached? Not necessarily. But fixing this requires something British politicians have been allergic to for decades: hard truths. To fix the UK, we would need to 1. Bulldoze the planning laws, piss off the NIMBYs and build millions of homes so young people can afford to live. 2. Invest for the long term. Stop cutting capital budgets to pay for day-to-day bills. Build the train lines, build the reservoirs, build the labs. 3. Fix the trade relationship. We don't have to rejoin the EU politically, but we have to stop pretending that trade friction is a freedom. We need to align with our biggest market. 4. Tax wealth, not just work. We need to shift the burden from the guy working 60 hours a week to the guy sitting on $5 million of unearned land appreciation. It is doable. Countries recover from worse. Germany rebuilt from rubble. South Korea went from poverty to a tech giant in 40 years. But it requires us to stop obsessing over our imperial past, statues, flags, World War II nostalgia, and start obsessing about our future. We need to stop acting like a retired empire and start acting like a hungry, modern, mid-sized nation. The empire is dead. The question is, do we want to be a living nation, or a graveyard with a nice gift shop? Final thoughts. That was a lot. If you're feeling a bit depressed, I get it. But knowing why things are broken is the first step to fixing them. Or at least, understanding why your train is late and your rent is high. If you're in the UK, this is your reality. If you're watching from the US, Canada, or Europe, take notes. Because the diseases that infected the British economy, NIMBYism, underinvestment, and political short-termism, are contagious. We are just the canary in the coal mine. If you want to understand how other empires collapsed, I've got a video on the fall of Rome coming up. Or, if you want to know why, the US housing market might be next. Let me know so I can prioritise it. But seriously, I want to hear from you in the comments. Specifically, if you could change one law in the UK to fix the economy, what would it be? Build on the Greenbelt, rejoin the EU, tax the rich? Let me know below. Thanks for watching. Good luck out there. You're going to need it.